last lecture, right? There's lots of information here, but it's not that bad. The reproductive system is a longer lecture, so I'm just warning you on Monday when you come in that's going to be long, because it's like the male and the female reproductive system in one day. So bring your caffeine, your candy, whatever you want. Stay awake. So let's go ahead and get started with the urinary. Do you guys get this joke? No. So I guess you got like number one and number two.
Oh, that's really funny.
Oh, that so this is the bladder, he's number one, and then intestines, number two. So if you're not from here, this is like the polite saying of I need to go to urinate, you say I'm going number one. If you have to defecate, you're going number two. All right. So the urinary system is overall not very complicated. There's only the kidneys, right? So the kidneys, their primary job is to filter the blood and take the wastes, secrete them, create urine, and then secrete it out of the body. So the kidneys produce the urine. The ureters are the tubes that carry the urine from the kidneys to the bladder for storage. Right? So the urinary bladder just stores it. And then the urethra is the small tube that leads the urine out of the body. So not too complicated. The kidney is the one that we're going to spend the most time on, the internal structure of the kidney, and the nephron is what we're going to draw here. And so we can see also that sitting on top of our kidneys is a gland, the suprarenal gland, that we'll talk about next Wednesday, the last day of class. So if you notice how the kidneys are positioned, notice that the right kidney is slightly lower than the left kidney. That's not just a mistake in their drawing, that's true. Why do you think the kidneys are not at the same level? Because the liver. Because the liver, right. So the liver, if you remember, the right lobe of the liver is much, much larger than the left lobe. And so the right lobe pushes that right kidney down just slightly. So here's from the posterior view, so this is the right kidney. And you can also see that the kidneys are situated pretty high up. They're behind a couple ribs, right, your last two ribs. And this is because most people, when they think about where their kidneys are, I think people point to the small of their back, like the lumbar region of their back, which is a little bit too low. If you remember, so obviously they're in your abdominal cavity, but the diaphragm is very curved. The attachment site to your diaphragm is the xiphoid process, so it kind of curves up and around like that. So they're definitely in the abdominal cavity. They're retroperitoneal, so they sit behind the peritoneal cavity. Behind the peritoneum. And so if you look at the functions, right, the functions of the urinary system are, of course, to excrete our metabolic wastes from what we take into our body, from the food and from our medicines and things like that. Maintain water, electrolyte balance, and salt balance. So not for me, but for your physiology teacher, right, you're going to learn a lot of what the nephron does. So your kidneys are responsible for getting rid of extra salt, or mediating how much water your body needs back, or you can get rid of extra water. If you look at the number 3, where it says pH balance, pH is basically just how many hydrogen ions you have in solution, because that's what the H in pH is the power of hydrogen. So the more H pluses you have, the more acidic your fluids are. And so your kidneys can actually either excrete or hold on to the hydrogen ions based on what you need. So it can balance the pH of your body fluids. And so there's a healthy range in pH of your urine. So urine can be slightly basic and also be slightly acidic. It just depends on what your body needs to get rid of. And then for number 4, I'll talk about these a little bit later. And then number 5, it helps to activate vitamin D. And so let's go ahead and look at our kidneys. So I mentioned that they're retroperitoneal. You can think of them as big as your fist. They're sort of fist size, so about 4 inches long, 2 inches wide, 1 inch thick. And let's look at the layers. So this cartoon, right, this is your kidney. And the layer that's right on top of your kidney itself is called the capsule. So when you look at a kidney model, for example, this brown outer covering, that would be the capsule of the kidney. And then inside, we have softer tissue. So the capsule is connective tissue, protects the kidney. Inside is very delicate, right? It's where all of our blood is getting filtered, so it's very important. So we have our capsule. So we find the capsule here. We can see the very first layer on the kidney. And then there's going to be a layer of fat that surrounds the kidney because it's a cushioning tissue. And then after that, we have our fascia. So the fascia is another band of connective tissue that holds the fat onto the kidney. So that's all it is. So renal capsule, we have some perirenal fat, and then some renal fascia. If you look at the kidney, the way it's color-coded here, you can see the outside of the kidney is slightly orange, and the inside have these little sections. It looks a little bit like an orange, like the segments. That inner part's the medulla. So let's look at a real one. So here's our kidney. All right, so we can really see that the cortex, the outer part of the kidney, is different in texture and also in color than the inner parts. The inner part here that's more red, that's the medulla. So again, just like the lymph node, right, it has a cortex and medulla. So when we look at the diagram, so we want to look at this. Oh, so here's the actual kidney, right? So you can see the relative texture, the kidney being shaped to it. Remember the kidney, this dented area of the lymph node, as well as the kidney, that's the hilum. And then we have our blood vessels coming in, renal artery, renal vein, and then the ureter is also going to be exiting here. So if you just take a look at the model from the back, right, we can see that we're looking at the renal artery, renal vein, and the ureters. Those are the structures found in the hilum. Okay, so we have our number one layers of the kidney. So this is a really great diagram because it sort of just looks like this. So the structures there are going to be mimicked on this kidney. And so the renal column, so if we're under layers within the kidney, letter B, the outer renal cortex, and then the renal columns here. So the columns are going to be structures that look like cortical tissue. So the cortex here, the lighter part, is going to reach down in between our little pyramids. So those triangular regions that look red, those are renal pyramids. And so our columns are between our pyramids. Now, the pyramids are structures within the medulla, right? So remember that the medulla is just a region. It's just the inner part of the kidney. So what's there? We have the pyramids are definitely part of the medulla, and we also have our columns, right? Our columns are also found in the medulla. And then in the medulla, so we had talked about the pyramids, and then the papilla, the tip of the papilla, the tip of the pyramid is the papilla, which is here. So that's the renal papilla. And then the base of the pyramid is here. So the base is what faces the cortex. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to see that word papilla a couple more times. So then, your kidney, like all this part, the cortex and the medulla, that contains the actual cellular components that create the urine. When the urine is done, it actually drips out from this papilla into the first little funnel system. The first funnel that catches it is called the minor calyx. And then when the two minor calyces converge to a wider area, that's called a major calyx. All right? And then when all the major calyces, so if you look at this picture, right, here's a minor calyx, here's a minor calyx. Right there where my finger is, that would be a major calyx. Okay? Minor calyx, major calyx. Minor, 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 and here would be a major. This is the convergence of the minors. When all the major calyces converge, and you reach basically this point where the urine has no choice but to leave down the ureter, so this is called the pelvis. So that's called the renal pelvis, which is right there. Okay, so urine will be formed in this tissue. Urine will drip out from the papilla into the minor calyx, go to a major calyx, go to the pelvis, and then out the ureter. I have in your outline that the word calyx is singular. If you want to make it plural, it's calyces, spelled slightly differently. All right, so that's the gross anatomy of our kidney. So lots of big structures. We can see these structures, right? Because gross anatomy is what you can see with the eye. So cortex medulla, we can see our pyramids, we can see a column right there. We can see our calyces, right? So a minor calyx, so we can see the little groove. Doesn't look like much, but it's a little groove. A major calyx where two grooves come together, the pelvis, and then the ureter. All right. This is just an image your book throws in because it shows you that the kidney's not a flat two-dimensional structure. Like this makes it look like it's a two-dimensional structure. But really you have these pyramids in a three-dimensional form, right? So you have calyces reaching posteriorly in any direction, and so all of your kidneys forming urine. And then here's where we're going to start to draw. So this is, in purple, this is the nephron. And what I'm going to do is we're just going to stretch this guy out, and so we can look at the parts of the nephron. And so this yellow part is also going to be drawn. It's technically not part of the nephron, it's a collecting duct. And then down here, it's a papillary duct. So this yellow is a collecting system, and nephron's in purple. So let's begin. So the nephron is the structural and functional unit of the kidney. Kind of like the osteon is for bone, right? So it creates the whole kidney, and it's the functional component as well. And it's going to start off with this circular structure that you can see here. And then it's going to have a tube that leads away from that circle. So let's go ahead and draw that. So this is our circular structure, this, and actually we're going to lead away from it. And then we're going to have a curvy part. This is a folded part like this. So this is convoluted, and I leave space inside the tube here so that we can draw something inside. And then what happens is this folded part does a dive down, hairpin turn, comes back up, and then does another curvy part. Then when you get to the end of the curvy part here, it changes color in the PowerPoint, so it goes to yellow. So I'm just going to change my color pen. So there's a straight tube that goes down. And then at the inferior part of this, this is a collecting duct. And then at the inferior portion of the collecting duct, it does change name. So I'm going to go ahead and change color, just to remind you that it changes name. At the very bottom. Like the scaffolding. So we're going to go ahead and put in the labels of what each part's called. Actually, let's put the blood in first. So let's go ahead and put our blood vessels in first. So we know that our kidneys, they're filtering your blood, right? So your blood is going to go into the kidneys, then all the waste products will leave your bloodstream and go into the filtering system. So the blood vessel is going to enter into this round portion. The blood vessel that delivers blood into it is called the afferent arteriole. arteriole. So as it comes into this first part of the nephron, the afferent arteriole will become a capillary because capillaries are what diffuse substances out of the bloodstream. And a capillary, it becomes kind of a knot. So here, let me show you the picture of what it should look like. So here's our afferent arteriole, and then here is our knot of capillaries. There are cells on top of it, which is why it looks purple, but if you just draw kind of a scribble, right? That's a capillary system, and then exiting from there would be the efferent arteriole, E for exit. And while the blood vessel has turned into a capillary, its name, it has a name, is called the glomerulus. So G-O-O, glomer, M-E-R, ulus, U-L-U-S. And so this is a capillary, right? Would you think that this is a continuous capillary or a fenestrated capillary? They're both able to diffuse products, right? But the kidney is definitely a filtering organ where you want to get all your waste products out of your bloodstream, right? So then it's going to be a fenestrated capillary. It's going to have regular pores, these fenestrations. So the glomerulus is a fenestrated capillary. So let's go ahead and just name the parts of the nephron. So this initial part here, this round, so everything, the glomerulus plus this black line is called the renal corpuscle. So renal corpuscle. And then the extension, the first segment coming away from it is folded up, and the word they use is convoluted, and it's proximal, it's right next to our corpuscle, so they call it the proximal convoluted tubule, abbreviated PCT. Of course, you can abbreviate for your own notes, but on the exam I would want you to write out proximal convoluted tubule. And then this area that's also folded up, but further away, you guys want to guess what it's called? Distal, well, this one. This is the loop, you're ahead of me. Distal convoluted tubule, right? So we have proximal convoluted tubule here, distal convoluted tubule here, and then between them is a loop. And that's called the nephron loop. Also referred to as the loop of Henle. And if you imagine the filtrate, the fluid coming away from the bloodstream, it would travel through the PCT, it would travel down this part of the nephron loop. So this portion here is called the descending limb. And then the filtrate would come back up, and that's called the ascending limb. And then the purple region, this collecting system, right, is called the collecting duct. And the collecting duct actually collects from several nephrons. So you could show this by kind of just adding other little sections like that. other nephrons are coming in. And then the name change is the collecting duct will then shift as the very, very bottom. It's called the papillary duct. So the fluid, let's name the fluid. So as the fluid comes out of your bloodstream and fills up this nephron, it's called the filtrate, right? Because you're filtering the blood, and this is what's filtered out. So it's called filtrate. So all this fluid will be coming in this space, this capsular space. This space here, right, is called the capsular space. So this is filtrate. And the filtrates can just move through, right? So you can do every once in a while some arrows going down the descending limb, up the ascending limb, through the DCT, into the collecting duct. Show filtrate coming in from other areas. Here. So the job of the nephron is to, of course, to filter all the waste products out, but then there's all these other very fine tuning of what actually becomes urine. So how much salt are you going to secrete? How many hydrogen ions are going to secrete? There are a lot of modifications that happen to the urine throughout these tubes. And so urine, when it's finally done and finished being modified, it's at the papillary duct. The papillary duct is when it's completely done being modified. We can put a drop of urine here. Okay. Anyway, so there's your urine. So where is this, right? So remember I was talking about how the kidney, if we look at the big picture of the kidney, where does the urine actually get secreted? It's at the renal papilla. So at the very point of this pyramid, that is called the papilla. And so this papillary duct is found in that area, in the papilla of our little pyramids. And so what surrounds the papilla, right, if you look at this, what surrounds it, that's going to be the minor calyx. So we can just draw like this surrounding system here. It's a little bit of a funnel, and that's called a minor calyx. Right, this is urine. Okay, so a couple more things to just talk about. There's, within the proximal convoluted tubule, there are specialized cells, very, very long microvilli. So if you look at the little section that it cut here, they're cuboidal cells, and then they have microvilli. If you look at the other sections that they show, there's no microvilli. So what is microvilli? What's the function of it? Why would a cell have them? Surface area. Increased surface area, right. So what happens is, so we can draw some cuboidal cells here, and just exaggerate the microvilli. So this is within the whole PCT. So basically, the filtrate, this glomerulus, these holes, these fenestrations, allow a lot of substances to come out. Not only are all your wastes coming out in the filtrate, but there are also nutrients that are getting out along with the waste. So in this very first section, the PCT is reabsorbing those nutrients. It's like, whoops, we want that back, right? So glucose comes back, vitamins come back. So this increases the surface area so that we can reabsorb what we want back in our body, right? And then let the waste continue on. So this area here, right, this PCT, is, you make a note that it's an area of resorption. And the microvilli are a hallmark. It's an anatomical feature that tells you we have a lot of absorption going on. So it's called resorption. Resorption occurs here. Okay. And just the last thing we're going to do to this picture at the moment is to just draw a dotted line that goes across something like this. So we're going to go underneath our corpuscle, underneath our PCT, underneath our PCT, like that. So everything that's above our dotted line is going to be found only in the cortex of the kidney, and below the dotted line is mainly in the medulla of the kidney. Okay, so this is everything above it is cortex. And then it's the medulla. Any questions about the nephron, basic structure of the nephron?
The ascending limb is thicker than the descending.
Yeah, so both limbs have a thin and thick section to it. I'm not really gonna require that. So don't worry about that. However, yes, you notice the descending limb and the ascending limb, there's thick and thin portions of each one. That becomes really important in physiology. Not thin. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the filtration membrane. Okay, so under letter D, the nephron, number one is the renal corpuscle. So let's look at this a little bit more carefully. So this corpuscle, okay, has the glomerulus inside. So letter A, you guys know what that is. That's a fenestrated capillary. And then letter B, there's Bowman's capsule. Okay, so Bowman's capsule has been changed to glomerular capsule in your textbook. It's just kind of the generic term for it. I still like to use Bowman's capsule. It's easier to say than glomerular capsule. But this capsule has two layers to it. So the outer or the parietal layer is going to be just what is outside, right? So this is the parietal layer of Bowman's capsule. And the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule are these purple cells, and the purple cells are on top of the glomerulus on the capillary. Do you guys see that? So these cells, which consist of the visceral layer, are also referred to as podocytes. These are podo meaning feet, or go to podiatrist, that means foot. So these are foot cells. These cells look like they have feet because they're extensions of the cell, wrap around the glomerulus, and they create little slits, and those slits are filtration slits. Okay, so it's all going to come together in a second. So you can see that the fluid that's traveling within our glomerulus, right, there's another layer of cells on top of it that that are going to be part of this filtration membrane. Okay, so it's going to keep some substances in. And then this space, again, is the capsular space. And you can see that the way that they drew this, right, this is the initial part of the PCT, the proximal convoluted tubule, and it does show the little cuboidal cells, very long microvilli in there. All right, so let's talk about the filtration membrane. So what's physically filtering your blood, right? So what's going on here? Let's look at this next picture. Right? So imagine that you're inside of this capillary, right? You're right next to this red blood cell. You are a piece of waste. Let's say that we want to, or like maybe not, maybe you're a nutrient, right? You want to get out of the bloodstream and you want to go and become part of the filtrate. What are the barriers that you encounter as you move away, right? As you move out. So that's the filtration membrane. Just like a coffee filter, right? A coffee filter is a physical barrier that's going to stop the coffee grounds, but allow the water and the yummy caffeine out. So that's this membrane here. So the very first thing you encounter is a capillary endothelium. So that's just the capillary lining, right? The endothelial cells. That's going to block all kinds of blood cells. Red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, those should all stay within the bloodstream because they're too big to exit out of here. Then, anytime you have endothelial cells, anytime there's epithelium, okay, there's basal lamina. So you can have a small little smidge of these organic molecules. Those are going to block big proteins, because proteins might be able to get out of those pores. Remember, our capillary is fenestrated. So like albumin, for example, could get out, but it doesn't because it hits this basal lamina. And then there are our final filtration slits, these slits that are created by our podocytes. Okay? So there's three parts, there's three like barriers that a molecule would encounter. And if you can slip through all those barriers, then you are part of the filtrate. Okay? So, would it be normal to find proteins in urine? Would you find albumin in urine? So albumin, things like proteins, right? These big plasma proteins would stay inside the bloodstream, right? So we're talking about right here, right? So what comes out? If you're a protein, you're going to be blocked because the protein's too big. It's going to hit that basal lamina, and the basal lamina is going to prevent it from seeping out. So if you found proteins in your urine, it could be a sign of kidney damage, meaning that there's some erosion going on with this filtration membrane, and it's allowing these larger substances to come out when it shouldn't, okay? So you should never find large proteins in the urine. That's a sign of kidney damage. Should red blood cells, are they normal part of urine?
No.
No, right? Your urine is not, no red, no blood in there. White blood cells also not, all cells are supposed to be kept in the bloodstream. Okay. So that's our filtration membrane. So we got three components there. And we talked about number 2, the tubules, which is what we drew on the boards. We labeled all our tubules. I do mention that the tubules are mostly cuboidal. I want you particularly to remember that, of course, they're long microvilli in the PCT. Okay. And if it's a thin portion, like the thin part of the limbs, then it's not cuboidal anymore, it's squamous. But okay. All right, any questions? Let's look at the types of nephrons. So it turns out that there's these nephrons can be long or short. And well, before we go look at that, it's a pretty picture, right? So this is our glomerulus here. We have our capillary. We haven't talked about these yet, but we have our afferent arteriole with an efferent arteriole. So blood vessels coming in. And this is a nice picture of our podocytes in purple, and then the foot processes that come off. And the red would be the glomerulus. Okay, so this is what I'm talking about. So there are two kinds of nephrons in the kidney. There's a shorter guy that's higher up in the cortex, and so that's named the cortical nephron. And then there's a longer nephron that sits more in the medulla, right? And that's called a juxtamedullary nephron. So juxta means next to. Yeah, so juxtamedullary nephron. most of your nephrons are cortical, but about 85%, right? And then the rest of them are these long juxtamedullary ones. And if you look at the models, which you guys will be looking at later on, and you see this like detailed section of the kidney, you can see the white nephrons, and the one is longer, and next to the, so this would be the juxtamedullary nephron. The shorter one that's higher up, this is the cortical nephron. The same thing is true for those two of these models, right? So this one is a very long nephron, this one's a shorter nephron. And I want you just to notice, it doesn't matter if you're long or short, the dotted line still is valid because what's in the cortex, right, there's the glomerulus, the PCT and DCT, all those kind of windy parts are only in the cortex. In the medulla, you would only find either part of the loop or the whole loop, and then also the collector duct or capillary duct. So you never find like this part of the nephron in the medulla. Okay. The next part here is number 4, peritubular capillaries. Now I mentioned that the nephron is always modifying the filtrate. So things are going back into the bloodstream. So where's the bloodstream? Okay, because you need to have blood vessels nearby in order to reabsorb these things that your body wants back, and that's what your peritubular capillaries are, right? So peritubular, meaning around the tubes, because the nephron is a set of tubes. And you can see how they just hug the entirety of the nephron. So what happens is, after the blood gets filtered, it comes out the efferent arteriole, and then the efferent arteriole double backs and covers up the nephron. So you don't need to do this because it's going to ruin your picture, but this, it's going to be like this, right? So this is going to be your peritubular capillary network. And so after these peritubular capillaries, right, the capillaries with diffusion happening, then they'll start to become little veins. Okay. But this efferent arteriole enters into our peritubular capillaries. All right. Next up is the juxtaglomerular complex. This is basically a tongue twisting chapter. Juxtaglomerular complex. So this is back to this image right here. So this box, juxtaglomerular complex. There's specialized cells in different areas for different functions. So let's start with number 1. The juxtaglomerular cells, they're going to secrete renin, and they're inside the afferent arteriole. So let's look at our afferent arteriole, right? And this has been cut open to see that we have a line of specialized cells. So what does renin do, right? Why is renin important? So I didn't put the function here, but it's in the very first part of the outline. So it increases blood pressure. So it indirectly increases blood pressure. There's a pathway called the renin-angiotensin pathway so when renin is made, it's an enzyme that activates angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 activates angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 increases blood pressure. So renin is required for the whole pathway to work, but it doesn't exactly directly increases blood pressure, but indirectly. So that's why I put the word indirectly there. So you know it's involved, but it doesn't directly like constrict your blood vessels or anything like that. Okay, so we have blood pressure management at the kidneys. Number 2, the macula densa is found in the DCT. We have chemoreceptors there that can detect the solute concentration. So let's look at this. It turns out that the nephron here, it's really tightly squished together, and then the DCT comes and hits the corpuscle again like this, right? So if you study this, the PCT, proximal convoluted tubule, is this guy. It goes down, right? This is the loop. It would come back up, and and then here we start to create the DCT. So the little section here is what you see there. So this is the distal convoluted tubule, and inside there's a collection of cells that are densely packed together, which is why they call it macula densa. And it's only these guys. I get this question every semester. Is everything macula densa? No. Just these cells that are slightly different, darker in color, that are closest to our collection of cells here. Okay, so this is just macula densa. So as the filtrate runs through the DCT, these cells can detect, oh, we need to absorb water because we're too dehydrated, or we can let this water go because we're hydrated. Okay. Lastly, we have this guy. They're called the extraglomerular mesangial cells. You can drop extraglomerular if you'd like. We'll just call them mesangial cells. These cells secrete erythropoietin, so EPO. And erythropoietin stimulates red blood cell production. So this is a hormone. Okay, so your kidneys produce a hormone. And red blood cell production is, when would you kick it up? Do you guys know like when you need more red blood cells? Any? Huh?
A laceration.
Exercise?
Laceration.
Oh yeah, you could cut, yes, you're bleeding, yes, and then exercise. A little bit, if you're in higher altitude maybe, right? Huh?
Less oxygen.
Yeah, so if you have less oxygen around you, so if you're in a higher altitude, you would start to create more EPO. Yeah, but also in a cut, or if a woman is on her menstrual period, then she's losing blood, she can also have that EPO. So EPO, it's kind of in the news every once in a while because sports athletes will dope with EPO. They will give themselves this hormone, and it makes them create more red blood cells, and then the athlete is going to be better at lasting, like outlasting an endurance sport, like biking, marathon running, things like that. So you might hear it in the news as a doping mechanism. All right, so let's look at the vasculature. So this is the end there, that juxtaglomerular complex. And then the last thing about the kidneys is just the blood vessels there. All right, so this picture is really great for blood vessels, and blood vessels are, I'll show you the model in just a second. So I have listed in order in your outline the blood vessel network as they come in and then out. So we're starting at the renal artery, right? So this is an easy one to find. This is the renal artery. When the renal artery branches within the kidney, they're called segmental, all right? Segmental arteries. And then segmental arteries will lead, and then they'll go between the pyramids, outlining a lobe called interlobar. So I've missed telling you this. There's a section, let me show you a lobe. All right, look, lobe. So it's the dotted line. So what is a lobe, right? It's basically just a section of your kidney that contains a pyramid, and it contains a little bit of the column all the way up to the top, right? So it's kind of like getting a piece of a pie and getting everything within that piece of pie. So that's a lobe. So when a blood vessel is going to run on the border of that lobe, it's called interlobar, okay? We can also say that interlobar arteries and veins run within a column, right? Because these sections between pyramids were called columns, renal column. All right, so we have so renal artery becomes segmental artery because interlobar artery, let me go back to the picture, right? Interlobar, and then as it arcs over the base of your pyramid, those are called arcuate. And then as they extend or radiate into the cortex, those are called cortical radiate arteries and veins. But let's follow the artery. So we have the cortical radiate artery. Now we're in the cortex. What comes next? What's in your notes? Cortical radiate comes afferent arteriole, right? So this blood vessel that will go into your corpuscle, right, is actually a branch off of, so I don't know if you want to draw this, but it's a branch off of the larger cortical radiate. our afferent arteriole, becoming the glomerulus, becoming the efferent arteriole, becoming, this is like, it's probably not very exciting for you guys, becoming the peritubular capillaries. Then we're on our way back out. Then we can say, okay, now we're going to become the cortical radiate veins, okay, bringing the blood back out of the kidney, then the arcuate vein, interlobar vein, and then the trick is there's no segmental. Yeah, so I have in parentheses, there's no segmental vein. So if it's not arcuate, then it's interlobar, and interlobar becomes renal vein. So that's the hard part, you guys. We're done with the hard part of the lecture. So let's just recap, okay? I'll use the models to recap. So this is the overall kidney. All right, this model has a adrenal gland on top with a suprarenal gland on top. When you look at your models later, you know, this one's really good for the sections, the calyces. So we have the cortex on the outside, the medullary